Yeah, I was going to say.
Okay, so we're currently testing the screen camera which you have seen.
Is it picking it up?
Should be.
I'll move that as well. Whenever, it's fine. I don't read the camera, that's why. Oh, okay.
There we go, make sure.
Yeah, the camera's working fine.
We can set chats as well. Whenever like the time and
Yeah, on the current.
I'll go on when you start. Okay, so we're starting the session in 5 minutes, 10 minutes.
No. Cool? Should be great. So.
Camera-wise, how does it look?
Can you move the mic down to like there? So it's
Here.
yes, it's pointing at the face from like your from like sternum, if possible. I'm sorry if that makes it awkward.
Actually, Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us today in our second UX session and our third in-person event. Who's joining us today for the first time? Me. Okay. Cool. Nice. And who attended, from those who did not raise their hands, who attended the first UX session? Okay, great. So we have new faces, and that's why today we're going to start with a quick recap of what happened in the first session, just a couple of slides for you guys to know about UX design. And the last question, for those who did not attend the first session, who knows UX design or heard about it before? Okay, great. Cool. So UX design is basically what it feels for your users to use your products or services, right? It's not about how fast you can do A, B, C, and D in your software or product, but rather how it feels when you're doing A, B, C, and D. And last time we actually described it in 3 different ways. We said UX design, every software, every product, every service you're going to work on in your university, post-graduation, when you go and you work in a company, you should aim that these products and services, they are solving problems, but also they're generating positive emotions while doing so, right? And we also explained how UX is a research-based discipline. When you hear about UX design, you probably think about prototyping or just drawing screens on the board, and that's just perhaps 10 or 20% of it. UX is a research-based discipline, and you need to do research. If you're not doing research, you're not doing UX, right? So it's quite important to get that. We also talked about what makes a great product. Last time, we mentioned how most companies, they focus on the first 2. The functional design, how many features do I have in a product? Does it work? The ASIC design, how beautiful is the product? How appealing, how visually appealing it is to everyone. But really, just a few percentage of companies, they focus on the third one, which is the most important one, which is experience design. Everything around you has been designed before. The ceiling, the chairs, the bed that you sleep on at night, they have all been designed. And your software should be the same. It's not enough to have a functional product, a product that's appealing, but rather you should focus on the whole user experience journey for your products and services. And lastly, we mentioned the design process of the UX design. We mentioned how UX happens here. When you're basically doing research, you define what you collect, and then every time you want to come up with a feature, you want to design some sort of thing in your software, you want to do a prototype, you want to validate it, make sure that you're actually solving the right problems for the right users, and then you go to the expensive business of building it and then testing it, right? And we actually also talked about identifying desirability. Which is basically every single time you want to build a product, you want to ask yourself, is there a problem? And if there is a problem, is your product solving it? And most companies, they just stop right there. Yes, we're solving the problem. But you should be asking yourself as well, is the experience great? Because that's what you want to focus on. So that was pretty much what we discussed in our first session. And today, we're going to be discussing a couple of more important topics, which is, first of all, we're going to be talking about features, not how good features are, but the opposite, the danger of features. We're going to be also talking about finding your design target. So whether you're a third year now working on your university project or working on a side project here and there, make sure that you always keep what we're talking about today in mind every time you're designing something. And you have papers right in front of you for writing notes, and we're going to be using them in a bit. We're also going to be talking about UX design heuristics, and we're going to discuss a couple of principles. Okay, so features. features are dangerous, right? Every time you add a feature to your product, to your software, to your website, to your app, you name it, there's actually a trade-off. Features bring complexity, right? When you have a feature, you basically need controls to manage that feature. And every time you add more controls to your interface, this basically means you're bringing more complexity to it. You're cluttering the interface. So features can be good, don't get me wrong, but not because you can add a feature, then you should add it. So it's quite important to know that if you want to add a feature and you have specified that there's a problem and you're solving it through this feature, it shouldn't be a guesswork. It should be designed. Features are not random. Features should be designed, and today we're going to discuss how. So before we begin, everyone has a paper in front of them? Yeah? I'm going to ask you just for 20, 30 seconds to draw a simple DVD remote control. I'm pretty sure most of you guys have used a DVD player. If not, have used at least a remote control for a TV. So just draw a simple remote control with the buttons that you think are relevant. I hope everyone can participate in this. Don't color it, don't make it 3D, just write and official main features.
Is this remote control for?
Well, for a DVD player, ideally. So for playing videos, going between videos. So. Okay, 10 more seconds. Okay, cool. Is everyone done? Yeah? It's fine, we're not going to be assessing your drawings. I just wanted you guys to do that to prove a point that we're gonna discuss in a second. Who's happy with giving me their drawings? Yeah? Perfect. No one else? Okay. Yeah? Great. Anyone else? No? Yeah. That's it. That's good. Thank you very much. Cool. All right. Point proven. We're going to discuss these in a second. So why did I ask you to do that, right? To draw a remote control in a UX session that's supposed to be quite technical. Well, we're going to discuss how dangerous features are by discussing this concept of remote control. So this is the very first Bluetooth remote control for a DVD player. And I'm pretty sure everyone here can know how to use that. Because it basically has 4 buttons. It's a simple interface, channel up, channel down, volume up, volume down. And that's it. It's quite simple, straightforward. So not a lot of features, and it's quite simple. When you're looking at this remote control, right? Personally, I did this mistake of clicking the button in the middle to either play a video, and maybe some of you have done this before, or to open the list of videos or something. Because when we're looking at this cluttered remote control interface, we see that the company basically are hiding the most important buttons that are used frequently and by most users between all of these buttons, which are in the middle. It's not really that straightforward. You'll have to think about it before you click it. And why do we even have all of these buttons, right? Some of these features are features that I've never heard of, and I believe you've never heard of as well, which is multi-mastering, depth control. Have anyone heard of this before? Exactly. So the fact that they're there, and the vast majority don't even know that they exist, and not just that, they don't use them, and it's not even important to them, is a problem. It's packed with features, and this is a result of the features arm race. Every single company, when they want to release a product or service, they want to think, oh, my competition, they're doing 10 features, I do 15 features. This is the features arm race. It's a very ridiculous way of thinking about adding features to your products. And features here, they're definitely not designed in some sort of way that makes sense for users. They're designed by accident. Just throw the buttons there. We love to add as many features as possible to prove that we're a very sufficient company, and that's about it. And that happens when you don't do UX design. However, when you do UX design, this is what you come up with. In my own personal opinion, that looks way better, minimalistic, and straight to the point. You know exactly each button what it does, and you know where to go if you want to do something like increasing the volume, changing the videos, and such. And when I ask you to draw some of the remote controls, so one of the drawings, basically, a couple of buttons, volume up, volume down, right, left, menu, select, and power off. Another drawing, the numbers, volume up, volume down, the channels, and that's about it. What does this prove? None of you here, let's say the vast majority, care about the rest of the features that these companies are spending time, money, resources to design them, build them, maintain them, support them, and continuously test them. So imagine the amount of resources and effort that is being spent on such features that nobody actually needs or wants to use. So the dangers of features. Features add complexity, right? When you add features to your product, you need controls to manage them, and the more controls you have, the more you're gonna clutter the interface, and you're gonna start affecting the core features of your product, which is basically, in our case, the play button, the changing the volume, the channel, and so on. Also, features add cost. Resources, money, time, and so on. And last but not least, just because you can doesn't mean that you should. Features should solve a problem. They should have a purpose. If there's no purpose, the feature shouldn't exist, and it shouldn't be there on your product. So why does this happen, you may ask? Why a company like Panasonic, they have a DVD with this remote that nobody really want to use some of its features? Why do they go about doing that? It all boils down to the engineering culture, right? And you might have noticed that engineers, by nature, right, and software developers and technicians, they like functionalities. They like to add features, right? They think, well, if we have 30 features and our competition has 20 features, we're winning the market. And from a marketing perspective, you might think the marketing department would actually approach this as, well, 30 features, you'll get it for £50. You want to go for a cheaper option, we'll give you 20 features for 35. And guess what? We have a £19 option with just a bargain offer, and it offers 10 features. So every time I encounter this, or I go about something and stumble upon a website or an app that has so many features and there's no design put in progress, it tells me that user experience and usability was never a priority in the design phase. And this tells you a lot about the company and how much they care about their users and customers. There are so many facts and statistics that are depressing when it comes to features. One of them that I personally like the most, which is 80% of your users will use 20% of your features. And if you think of that every single time you want to build an app, a website, it will make a lot of difference, and it will cut a lot of cost, time, and effort into building things and features that nobody really actually wants to use, needs, or enjoys using. So if the team at Panasonic did this very simple exercise that we just did at the beginning of this session, they would have built a more streamlined, cost-effective remote that would have saved them a lot of hassle with their customers. Because this exercise was done in so many UX sessions, and every single time, the vast majority drove something similar to this. So ask yourself, every time you add a feature, does anybody need it, right? And if they need it, what is the trade-off, right? Is it worth the complexity I'm bringing to my product? Because there are so many other products out there, and if my product has more features but it's more complex, it's making the user's life hard by using it, it's not gonna work. And the last one, what is the cost to design it well, right? So it's quite important to know that having a feature there that doesn't really work well or give the best UX is not better than not having it. And that brings us to the second topic, which is the importance of low fidelity design. Who heard of low fidelity designs, MVPs? Anyone? Have you ever seen with something like this before? So this is low fidelity, right? And it's one of the main important aspects of UX design. Because you're basically translating your thoughts into visual elements that are not expensive to design, but are very, very important to do and complete your research. So before we continue with explaining the importance of low fidelity, I'm just going to play this video really quick, which is how BMW go about designing their own cars. Do they just build them, or is there like a certain process that they follow? Sam?
When we work with car design, we work with clay. We make sure that the material that we use is a material that we can work with. When we have a three-dimensional surface in clay, we can add material and we can take material away, making sure that every line is exactly where we want it to be. We strive for perfection in surfacing, and we make use of the computer technology to verify that every curvature is perfect. The fascination of design approach into design basically comes to a point when this model is developing in clay, also crafted by hand in a clay model. Craftsmanship has a lot to do for us, and the clay model was exactly the right tool to bring perfection into our design. BMW design has a lot to do with form development, and for interior design especially, it was extremely important to develop all the surfaces we have, all the line movements we have in our interior in 3D, especially in a clay model. Interior design is not only a structural part of it, but also how materials and how those materials are reacting to the people sitting in the car. That's the reason why the material process and design research process always starts exactly at the same time as the designer starts sketching on the piece of paper. The emotions we are going to sketch, those emotions have to come also through the material quality we have, the craftsmanship, and all the details that we see there.
Okay, cool.
We use silver foil.
Well, that's important. It's almost done, anyway, it's fine. So what did we learn from this video? Right? Companies in the auto, Sam, just focus on the slide. There we go. Companies, not just BMW actually, Volkswagen, Mercedes, all of the companies in the auto industry, they understand that design is essential, right? Before you go about the expensive business of building their cars and then refining them later. So this gives us a huge insight on how things are done in the market when it comes to making sure that your design is valid, testing it first before you build it and spend a lot of money. So what do we mean and what do we need the design or the low fidelity for? So when they built this sculpture of the car, they built it for a reason. They want to interact with the car, because cars, for example, are highly interactive products, right? So you want to make sure that this car that you're building is actually quite interactive and it engages with the user the way that you want it. So they actually check how it feels to sit in the car, how it feels to play with the buttons on the dash. How does the car interact with the wind, with the rain, with the sun, right? So they do test all of these kind of things, and they actually bring real car enthusiasts to their factory to sit within these low fidelity prototypes, to experience the car first, give their feedback, and then once they get the green light, off you go. So what they're doing here, and going back to the design process, they are basically building a prototype. And prototypes are quite important for building anything really, right? Just think about building a prototype before you design anything from now on. If you're building a website, it doesn't hurt to get a piece of paper, sketch what you think it should like, then start iterating on it, and then start designing it. You'll see how the whole experience will change, right? It will change because your thoughts are clearer. You'll be able to test it with the target audience, and at the end, you'll be able to get feedback on how it feels to use this website, app, software, whatever. And this is not only in the auto industry, also when it comes to construction, you always see blueprints before they actually build the building. In fashion, you see fashion designers always doing sketches here and there to make sure that this is the design that they have in mind and it's being translated well. And in recipes, you don't go and cook something without actually having the ingredients in mind, knowing that this is how it should look like, and then you go and you cook it, right? And the same in software. I've been working in the web development industry for around 6 years now, and every single time we build a new website for a client, this is what they send us. A sheet full of requirements, requirement after requirement, and that's essential. Don't get me wrong. That's quite important to have when you're building your software, but that's not enough. Because you can't really translate interactions and emotions and experiences in a spreadsheet. These requirements, I can read them right now and I'll understand them in a different way than if Michael reads them and basically he'll understand them in a whole different way, because basically they're just text on a spreadsheet. We're not experiencing something with the user, we're not actually observing how they're interacting with our product or service. There's a very nice quote for Frank Zappa. He says, talking about music is like dancing about architecture. And it's there's no difference here, basically. You can't really tell much about software if you just go and you just prepare spreadsheets of features and requirements and you share them with users. Is that what you want? Yes, that's what I want. That's it. You don't just go and you follow that process. They should interact, they should engage, and they should experience whatever you're building. So how do you do that in the UX world? One of the ways is usability testing. Anybody heard of usability testing before? Okay, new stuff today. So usability is basically sitting with your potential user, showing them your prototype, and then observing how they're interacting with it, right? How are they using it? Where are they posing? Was this difficult for them? Was this a good step? And so on. So it's quite essential to do that. So low fidelity design, in a summary, it reduces ambiguity. The whole team knows this is what we're building, this is how it's going to look like, and this is how it's going to behave. Everyone knows what product are we building. Second of all, time and space to validate. You have the time to continue with your iterations, to go between designing, prototyping, validating, and then the result of that validation process will either bring you to another sprint or you go about building it and then testing it. So you have the time and you have the space to validate. Because if you build your product or your software or your app, and I keep saying or because this applies to everything basically, and then you find out that it's not usable, you've just wasted a lot of money, resources, and effort. And lastly, it reduces risk. Risk of producing services and products nobody wants, services and products nobody needs, services and products that are not usable, and the risk of damaging your brand and just producing things that actually add no value to people. That's low fidelity design. So once you do low fidelity, you come up with a new set of requirements, a new set of potential features, right? Now there's something is as important, which is prioritization, right? So how do you do that? Let's pretend that each of these lines is a use case. Who knows what's a use case? Anyone? Yeah?
So we ask the customer for information or client information and we build a story on that.
Okay, that's a very good definition. Well, a little bit simpler version of that is that a use case is how a user achieves something through your service, product, or interface, right? So let's pretend that we are about to build or not build, let's say we're actually assessing the use cases for Gmail or any mail software. One use case can be, I'm going to open Gmail and I'm going to go and draft an email and then send it. That's a use case. Another use case can be, I'll go to my Gmail and I'll search for an old email and read it, get the information I want, and then leave the app. Another use case, it can be, I want to go to my Gmail, I want to check any unread emails and read them. So there are so many use cases for any app, website, or software that you have. But the good thing is, not all use cases have the same value or the same importance. Therefore, the highest used or the top use cases, they're called high frequency use cases, which is like the ones that I just mentioned. And going back to the quote, 20% of your features will be used by 80% of your users. So in our case, reading emails, sending emails, and looking for emails is basically what most of us use Gmail or any of the other email solutions for. However, there are so many other ways and things that you can do through Gmail, but these are called edge cases. So that's the Gmail interface. When we're looking at it, we know that Gmail has so many features, but it's simple. right? It's easy to look at. It's easy to understand what's going on. Because Gmail basically highlighted 3 most important use cases. I go to my email to compose a new email and send it. I go to my email and check any unread messages, or I go to my email to search for old emails. The 3 main, most important use cases are there. And that doesn't mean that there are no edge cases. I can perhaps use Gmail to send emails from my personal email to my work email, but only these emails that have this keyword in the title. How common would that happen? But it happens. Well, therefore, Gmail tells you, the interface is clean. For the main use cases, you know what you want. But if you're about to do an edge use case, you need to work a little bit harder. And that's totally fine. Because if you're working a little bit harder to do something that's an edge case, and you're gonna spend a little bit more effort, that actually means that the vast majority of the people that are actually using your software for a common use case, they have a clean interface, right? And that's how you wanna think about your products. You don't wanna think about how can I make my software full of features. You wanna think about the vast majority, 80% of your users using the 20% of your features. Make them clear, don't clutter your interface, and for those who want to use the rest of the features, make them work a little bit harder. So let's take this for example. This is a website for a train railway company, an old website actually, and because they're so wise and their team, they're quite UX focused, they designed their checkout page, which is the page that you see after you decide where you're leaving, from which station, and where you're arriving. To give you this option, which is delivery method. This doesn't mean that they're going to deliver your ticket to you, but they're asking you, where do you want to pick up your ticket from? Let's say you're going from Portsmouth and South Station to Southampton Central. I just went on the train line, and I selected Portsmouth and South Sea, and I want to go to Southampton Central. Imagine if every single time I want to go and I want to get a ticket from Portsmouth to wherever, the website is going to ask me, where do you want your ticket to be collected from? Why did that happen? Because someone in the team said the most dangerous 2 words in the UX industry, what if? What if someone wants a ticket from Portland and South Sea, but they're busy, that's going to be quite busy, and they might want to pick it up from a closer station. I mean, that can happen, but how often? Why would you clutter your interface and put it as a main option every single time? In this case, and this is in Ireland, you'll have to go with every single option to reach your station, and if it was 40th on the list, you're just wasting people's time. Every single time. So, that's an example of designing your software for edge cases, and if you keep designing your software for edge cases here and there, every single time you're giving your user an interruption. Hey, you don't really need that, but I'm going to give you this option anyway. And if you keep interrupting your user, well, you're basically building a very annoying software that nobody wants to use. There's something that we're going to mention today. It's called the Reservoir of Goodwill, which is basically, if you want to think about it as like a balance that you have of positive emotions, and every single time you use a website or an app, and you go about an interruption, or something that shouldn't happen happens, this reservoir of goodwill, it diminishes. And at the end, by the end of your interaction with this website or an app, you'll be left with this quantity, and this quantity will determine the possibility of this user returning back to your website or software. So you want to make sure that while they're interacting with your software, their reservoir of goodwill is as high as possible from the beginning until the end. That's how they build loyalty, and that's how they're going to come back. So rules for prioritization. First, always focus on things that most people do most often. Then things that some people do somewhat often, and obviously things that people do infrequently. These what you should focus the most on. Things that some people do somewhat often, you want it on your interface, but let them work a little bit harder to find it. And the things that few people do infrequently, well, you want to think of a smarter way of displaying it. Finding your design target. Now I'm going to ask you, right? Let's say you're building a website for, I don't know, let's say people who travel quite often, for passengers. How would you really get about designing that website? How do you define the design target? Another target audience, because the target audience is people who like traveling, people who travel, people who use online websites to book their tickets. That's a design target. But what is, sorry, that's the target audience. But what is the design target? Anybody knows? Any ideas? How would you actually design your software based on the of my design of my target audience? Okay. So the design target is a quite important definition to grasp. So you might say, okay, so you want me to research and ask people and do usability tests and all of that UX processes that might be feasible for 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 people. But what if I'm developing a website for people from all over the UK or Ireland or wherever? And it's not really that logical or feasible to go and ask each one of them what they think of my software. So what do you do in that case? Target audience is basically everyone that you expect that will be using your software or your product. However, design target is what are the goals of these people and in what context and what set of behaviors do they have when they're using or interacting with my product or software. So 3 things: goals, context, and behaviors. 3 things that you should always keep in mind when you're designing your software. What are the goals of the users when they're using my software? In what context, what environment are they in? And what are their behaviors? To explain this a little bit better, we're going to be discussing 2 very cool chairs, which I'm not sure why their images are not showing. Okay, you want to refresh the page? We heard of the lazy boy chair, yeah? Cool, nice. All right, maybe skip. So the lazy boy chair is one of the most successful chairs in the history of chairs, right? And this chair right here is the other one that we're going to be comparing the lazy boy with. Yep, more, there we go, back. Yep, go back, you're almost there, perfect, just click on any, yeah, cool, just, great, yep, thank you. Okay, let's hope they will load. Awesome, cool. So we have 2 chairs, the lazy boy and the Herman Miller. Herman Miller is actually a very old chair. It was released in 1992, and it sells for over $1,000 until this day. And over $7 million dollars have been sold of this chair. On the other hand, we have the Lazy Boy, which was first released in 1927, and it also retails for over $1,000, and many millions of that chair has been sold. And if you do the math, we're talking about 2 very successful chairs, each in their respective category. So let's talk a little bit about the context, goals, and behaviors of each. So this chair, obviously, when we're talking about context, we're talking about the physical and emotional environment that I'm using this chair for. Obviously, it's at work, somewhere professional, an office probably. And what kind of goals do I need this chair for? Some people think when we talk about goals, we talk about, like for this chair, I don't want to get back pain from this chair. But every time you go to, I don't know, to your uni lab or to work, do you really think, I want to sit on this chair and make sure I don't have back pain? Or do you think, oh well, I want to sit in this chair because I want to get done, I want to get some work done, right? I want to do some work, I want to send an email, I want to get this report done. So basically, this chair allows you to do your work, but at the same time, keep you alert, comfortable, and injury-free. So we have a primary goal to do your work, and we have secondary goals that are supporting the primary goal. And what kind of behaviors? Sitting at a desk, using PC, reading books, moving around the office, you name it. Actually, this chair it did revolutionize the whole industry, because back then, they did not just design it because it was cool or nice. They designed it based on a very critical and advanced UX process. So back in 1925, they approached the Silicon Valley companies, Microsoft, HP, and Dell. You can tell how old the logos are. And they went to their offices and they basically observed how their employees are working in their company. On what chairs are they currently sitting, right? How do they interact with their other employees? If I want to go and sit next to this employee, what do they need to do? Back then, they needed to go, because the chairs were quite different than the chairs that we have now. I hope this works. Go back. Go back. No, not forward. Yep.
I don't know what's happening.
That's right. Next, please. Next. One more. There we go. These are the chairs that used to exist before that chair. Every time you wanted to go and sit next to your employee, you have to carry the chair and bring it next to them. 3 hours sitting in this chair and you have severe back pain. So that's why they went to these companies, they observed how these employees are sitting, how they're interacting in their own natural habitat, if you want to say. And then based on this feedback, they designed this chair that's quite flexible when it comes to adjusting the back, and it can move around. And that's why it's one of the most successful chairs when it comes to the professional environments. On the other hand, the lazy boy, what context does it have? You can use it at home, definitely not at work. And what goals, basically, you use it for. You want to watch TV, read a book, pet the dog, and most importantly, you want to relax, right? And the behaviors, what kind of behaviors might you do? Watch TV, curling up, petting the dog, sleeping, and such. So my question for you now is, let's say you're in a company, right? And you're the CEO of Lazy Boy. And you just attended this important team meeting. And the CEO of the company said, Tom is coming today and he's presenting us with this chair that's gonna make your life better. It's gonna make you more productive, more efficient, and you're gonna get more work done. And then suddenly, go back. You display this chair. Pretty sure most of the employees will be laughing at you at that point. But why? Why would a chair that's making millions and millions of dollars, that's quite successful, in its category, won't be suitable for a work environment? Why? Because if you put its context, behavior, and goals next to the work environment, you see that makes absolutely no sense. It will not just make the employees less productive, it will make their work almost impossible. Because doing your work, sitting at a desk, using your laptop, all these kind of things that are not possible with that chair. So what do we learn here? We learned that without specifying the context, goals, and behaviors of your users, you're just guessing. And you can't guess in UX. If you're guessing, you're not designing. If you're not designing, you're not doing UX. So it's quite important to always think of context, goals, and behaviors of your users. This sentence is a sentence that you should be repeating every day when you wake up and you're brushing your teeth. I'm not the target audience. It's that important, right? Because when you're designing a software or when you're working in a company, right, there's so much bias in our head. What the manager wants, how this feature came about, what are the policies behind this feature, why this exists, why this doesn't exist. There's so much bias in our heads, and we can't really make the right decisions if we think that we're the target audience. And honestly, I was a victim of this back a few years ago when I was just designing websites for my clients for the sake of what's cool, what I think would be better for them, and not really asking them for what they really need and asking their customers what they need. So it's quite important to always remember that you're not the target audience. Go back. So there's a very, very popular term or saying in the startup scene, get outside the building, right? And this quote explains it quite well. There are no facts inside your buildings to get outside. You have assumptions about your product, assumptions about your users, you have assumptions about how it should be, assumptions about how it shouldn't be. But how can you validate these assumptions if you're just sitting with your university group or your team at this company or whatever? You really need to get out there. Talk to people. And every time we do research, I think like every time we hear about research, we think of people wearing lab coats and papers and calculators, but it's really not that complicated. Research is just talking to people. It's as simple as talking to people, getting out there and talking to people. Okay. Anyone have any questions before we start the more important part of this session, which is basically what hopefully you'll be enjoying and using quite often. Nope? Okay. So, heuristics. What are heuristics? Anybody knows what UX heuristics are? Yeah? Tom?
Yeah.
You raise your hand, so what are they?
Heuristics is sort of like, I guess, sort of the guideline for it.
Yes, 100%. So they are high-level guidelines that you can measure your software against. And they're quite essential. Not just that, they are actually characteristics of best practice. How your software should be. How it should behave. And it's always a criteria to measure against. It's quite important to do heuristic evaluation, and it's something you can do at home, at your own time. You don't need to involve people. It's quite simple. Because a very simple heuristic evaluation can be a simple spreadsheet, and we're going to see that in a bit. Okay. So today, and this is basically what we're going to be discussing until the end of the event, we're going to be going through quick 10 heuristics for 3 big giants in the UX world. We have Alan Cooper. Alan Cooper has a book called The Inmates of the Asylum. Who read it? I highly recommend it because that book is one of the best books about UX, talking about how the users should be making these decisions that you usually make, and not you. He says the way to make software more human, to make them more usable, is to give them humane characteristics. And how do you do that? He says politeness is one characteristic that is shared across cultures, and it's what you want your software to be. And what does he mean by that? He says, think of your software as a very high-class VIP restaurant, right? This restaurant, every time you go to it, they know your name, they know who you are, they know your preferences, and they're confident, they are able to take control, but at the same time, they still know that you're the boss, right? So he says, think of your software as this restaurant and how it operates. And he mentioned that in the book, which I highly, again, recommend that you read. It's not a long book. The inmates are running the asylum is a quite interesting book. Jacob Nielsen, and personally, I benefited from his heuristics the most. We're going to be going over 4 of his heuristics, and finally, we're going to be going over the heuristics of Steve Krug, which he is the inventor of Reservoir of Goodwill, which is the term that we just used. Okay, so this is a very simple heuristic evaluation that you can do at home, basically. You can do for any software product that you want to build. And it doesn't matter how appealing it is. It doesn't matter how it looks. It just simply stating all of the heuristics that we're going to discuss now and putting a score against them and any comments. And actually, it would be great if you have another document of screenshots to validate or explain what you have in this table. So let's start with the very first one. Back. Okay. Software should be interested in me. What does this mean? Software should be interested in me. I've been using Gmail for a very, very, very long time, and I probably have sent over 1,000 emails, right? And I do have 2 emails. One email that has a signature that automatically gets, attached to the email every time I send an email. But I have another email that I'm just too lazy to set up a signature. And every single time, even though I send over 1,000 emails, and 90% of them I ended with something Muhammad. I still need to write my name to Gmail every single time without actually identifying it. While if I write any other word in the vocab, it tells me, oh, do you mean this? Do you mean that? While if I write my name, it doesn't suggest it. A very rare miss from Google. But within actually the same Google product environment, we see another example. So Salman is one of my work partners, and even though I have invited him to hundreds of meetings on Google, every single time I need to tell Google that no, he's not an external guest. Even though that I invited him to so many events and meetings, Google still don't recognize my friends and people who are close in my circle. However, I do appreciate it when Google or the Android software, basically, the Android services, they tell me, hey, you have an event coming up in a bit. I might not need that, but I do appreciate the gesture. These kind of small details, they actually make the experience. Making your software able to not just interact with the user, but make them feel important is quite essential. Second thing, software should be forthcoming. Imagine that you just went to a restaurant and you were looking at the menu and you decided, I want to eat salmon. Then the waiter came and you told the waiter, I want salmon. And he said, sorry, there's no salmon here. So I just spent 2-3 minutes looking at the menu, deciding what I want to get. And then he told me there's no salmon. A good waiter would tell you what's not available while they're handing you the menu. So you can not waste time and then regret spending all of that time later. So in this case, we have an interface of an ATM machine for a very famous bank in Europe. I believe it's in Ireland as well. Every time you want to withdraw money, this is the process. So click on withdraw, and here they've done something very smart. They they're showing you options. They're not telling you type up. They say you want to withdraw 20, 70, 40, 90, or which exactly. And if I choose 70, this is what it shows. Sorry, we're unable to spend the amount. Please try a different multiple. It did not tell me what was available. And it showed me options that were not available. And once I chose the option that's not available, it's not telling me what's available. So it's doing three things that are wrong at the same time. It's being completely not forthcoming. And this is not how you want to design your software. And yep, next. What if instead they design it in a different way, that while you just started interacting with the software, it told you what nodes that are available. And if, for any reason, you chose the wrong amount, it tells you and gives you instant feedback, like, hey, sorry, but you must choose either this, that, or that. And think about it when you're designing websites. How many times you've been to a website and you use the contact form, right? And it tells you that there's something wrong. But which input field is it? Was it the text field, or was it my email, or what's wrong with what I just entered? It should be forthcoming about these kind of things, and we're going to explain them more in a bit. Yep. It's not going forward. Okay, so next presentation. Anyone encountered such an issue before? No? Yeah? Okay, cool. 3, software should be confident. Nobody likes a waiter that's not confident, right? Do you have this? I'm not sure. Let me ask the chef and I'll get back to you. Do you have that? I need to run to the kitchen. I'll get back to you in 10 seconds. Nobody likes that. And the same with the software. Users like the software to be confident, to not be hesitant, to give them the information that they need at the right time and to be confident about it. In this case, imagine that you are going from the ground floor to the fourth to the 15th floor where you live. And every time you want to take the elevator, it asks you, are you sure you want to go to the 3rd floor in this case? Every single time. That would be ridiculous, right? However, not yet. That's not scary, not yet. However, we do see these on our websites and on different websites almost every single time. Pop-ups here and there asking us whether we want to do the thing or not. So, what's the logic behind that? If there is something that you want your user to do, and you want to make sure that they're actually doing it not by mistake, that's the only time you can actually make the interface more complicated for them to work a little bit harder to confirm their action. Like launching a nuclear weapon, for example. You want to make sure that they don't click on the button by mistake. But when it comes to, again, Google. And Google is a huge company. They have a UX team that's unbelievable. But it's the reason why I'm including Google in these examples for you to see that no website is perfect, no interface is perfect, and that's why continuous feedback and UX research is important. So every time I want to actually delete a sheet in my Google Sheets, it asks me, are you sure you want to delete that sheet? But if you want to think about it, how can I get that wrong? This is how you delete a sheet from Google. You scroll down, you right click, then you scroll up, then you click again. I mean, it can go wrong, but how often, right? However, if you go to Google Drive, and if you do something more serious, which is deleting the whole file, Google deletes it for you. But it gives you this feedback right here. It says, okay, you deleted it, but just in case it was a mistake, here's an option. for you to reverse what you did. That's a way better version of displaying feedback to your users. iTunes, in this case, is almost embarrassed to ask you this question. Do you really want to remove all of your songs? But it's giving you an option to not show this ever again. So if you really want to ask your users, do you want to do this? Are you sure about that? Make sure that you're not asking them these kind of questions all the time, especially when the task isn't really that obvious. And if you want to still ask them, give them the option to not hear your complaints again, right? So that software should be confident. Software should have common sense, right? Again, going back to this example, I just chose where I'm reporting from and where I want to arrive, and still the interface is asking me where you want to collect your tickets. And every single time, if I'm choosing, in Ireland there are 120 stations, if I'm choosing, in our case, what station was it? Go back. From Dublin, that's basically going to be the 30th or 40th on the list, and you're going to have to either click 40 times or scroll down and spend 10-15 seconds looking for that station. Imagine how much time you're wasting. So your software should really have common sense. It should connect these facts together and not show you different kind of interfaces that don't actually make sense. The visibility of system status. This is quite important, and it simply means keep the user involved all the time. When I'm sending an email, imagine if you just send an email, and once you hit send, that's it. You're always going to have this subconscious thought, like, was it really sent or was it not? Let me check the send folder. However, Google is giving you something called a toast in the UX industry. A toast means a very quick feedback for you to know what's going on at the moment. Because if I see this while I'm waiting, I'm relieved. Google's telling me, hey, I'm taking care of it, just wait a little bit longer. And once it's sent, it will tell me that it's sent. And if it was by mistake, it will show me an undo button to reverse that action. If you're downloading an app, for example, we have three different toasts here, right? You have the percentage, you have the megabytes, and you have the progress bar. Keep the user involved. Let them know what's happening at all times. Tell them that this is in progress, this has been done, now we can go and do your next thing. So this also applies to contact forms. Sometimes you go to a website and you click on send, and then it goes to the home page. Was that a refresh? Was that a back? Was it sent? Always communicate with the user and display feedback with them. And honestly, it doesn't have to be animated. It doesn't have to be very appealing. These are not very appealing, but they do the job. They are telling you that you just completed this action that you came to this website for, to this page for. So there's nothing to worry about. Again, carry on and continue doing your business. 6, your software should match between system and real life. Real world, in other words. How's that? People don't like jargon. People don't really understand everything that you do while you're designing your software. This is an example of a live banking website. I don't quite remember which bank it is, but this is the interface that you see when you want to filter your transactions. And this is available in all, if not most, online banking websites. When I click on the drop down, these are the options that I see. I see direct debit / credits. I know what's a direct debit, but what's / credits? I'm not sure, and I'm a bit worried right now. I'm not sure if that's the right option. Standing order debits. I know what's a standing order, but what's a standing order debits? Also not sure about that. Pass with caps on. We have also lodgements, I know what lodgements, but what's slash credits? Credit transfers. Checks. What are checks that are going into my account or vice versa? Other debits. Definitely makes no sense. Cash withdrawal, that's the only thing that I probably understood from this drop down. Using a lot of jargon like that will make your users not just not interested in your software, but they won't be able to understand it. And wouldn't it be better if they actually redesign, and not redesign actually, if they replace the text on the interface to something like this? Breaking it down, out of my account, in my account, and then direct debits, standing orders, transfers, and ATM withdrawals. Using language that are familiar with people. When you're designing a website, you're not designing it for all of the other experts out there that have the same knowledge and skills and expertise as you. You need to think of your user as someone that's seeing your website for the first time, and they're digesting this information for the first time, and they have no prior knowledge. Unless, of course, your website is, or your software is for specific expert group. Another example, go back a little, please. So here they have debit and credit, show what goes in, what goes out. Wouldn't it be better also if they show all of the transactions that are coming to your account and outgoing your account this way? No kind of jargon, just quite clear, simple, clean interface, what's going in, what's going out. 7, freedom and control. We humans, we all like freedom. We want to have control over our future, over our destiny, and over our software, right? And a software that doesn't give us freedom, a software that doesn't give us control, is gonna diminish the reservoir of goodwill, and it will lower the chances of us or any other users of using it again. In this example, we have this, again, another website of the online banking websites, and I'm checking my accounts, my bank statements to look for a certain transaction. I just clicked on a bank statement, and I just found out that this is not the right bank statement. I want to go and look for my transaction in another bank statement. However, because I couldn't find it, I did the most common action in the software industry, which is the back button. I hit back, and this showed up. And this is quite common when it comes to the financial websites, right? You can't use refresh, you can't use these kind of features that you expect to use on other websites, but because nothing really made sense to me. Like, I just arrived at this website and I felt I reached an endpoint. The software didn't give me an option to go back, and it didn't give me an option to know how to go to the main screen, let's say. Wouldn't it be better if we just added this very simple button at the top? Give the user the option to go back to the page, to the previous page whenever they want. Because if I don't have that option and I want to go back, I either need to know the hierarchy of the software and go back to the home page and go to this link to end up in the page that I was in previously, or I need to refresh, it will log me out, and I will need to log back in again and go through the whole process. That could have been simply and easily mitigated by adding this button. And what really bothers the UX designers, when, for example, like the ATM machine, it did not show you what kind of what money it has inside, but it does know that. It doesn't really take that much to code that simple piece of code to tell people what's going on. And therefore, in the ATM machine example, it's the main source of and main point of contact when it comes to clients and customers. And if every single time I'm gonna communicate with this ATM machine and it's gonna show me these kind of interactions that will lower my reservoir of goodwill, I'm not gonna be a customer anymore, or I will not really continue using this interface. 8, recognition rather than recall. How many times you go to a certain event and you remember some of the people, but you don't really recall their names? It happens to all of us. You say, I'm not names person. I can recognize who you are, but I don't really recall your name. And this is actually most of us, if not all of us. We don't really like recalling facts, recalling names. We like to recognize instead. We are highly visual creatures, and that's how you should design your software based on. So once again, from the online banking industry, let's say you wanted to go and look for send a transaction, and it just asks you select account, and you have a couple of accounts, and you need to send this transaction right now, and you're not sure which account it is. Both says current account, savings account, and of course you don't remember the actual ID of the account. So you're going to go through a whole of trial and error until you find it. But wouldn't it be easier if the bank simply did the following? They showed the balance available in every account. This way, without hesitation, you will say, okay, well, that's the account I want to enter to do and complete my transaction. We are visual. We like recognition, we don't like recalling. So don't make your users suffer. That's why also on Android, you see some of the contacts with their photos on, because Android wants to tell you, hey, you have an option to add a photo. Even iOS, of course. If you have a lot of numbers and you don't want to recall names, you can just look at their photo and you recognize them. Moving to the last two, heuristics. Don't force me your way. So what does don't force me your way mean? Numbers, dates, more and more. How many times you've been to a website and it asks you to enter your number in a certain format, right? Or a date, like your date of birth. Don't write like the day before the month or the month before the date, or don't put 7 without 0 behind it. These kind of things, they just make no sense. Why? Because, for example, this is a checkout page, and I'm about to spend a big amount of money on purchasing something from their website. And instead of taking my money, they displayed this error. Sorry, but you can't have spaces in your phone number. But this is how I write it, right? Just take my money. What really bothers me as a web designer is that the time spent on coding this error is the exact same time, if not less, that would take you to just structure this input field to accept different kind of inputs and then structure it in your database the way that you want. But why do you want to make the user go your way? Let them be free. Let them input their data the way that they want, accept all inputs, and then distribute it and store it the way that you want. So it's quite important to not miss these kind of things when you're designing your website, software, or whatever, because they really make a difference. And we talk about interruption, and that's an interruption. The last one is don't waste my time. Nobody likes their time wasted. And in fact, this photo right here is your user, right? You should look at it again every time you want to design software, websites, or apps, or whatever, because this is really who your user is. We're all multitasking every day. We don't have time to give 100% headspace to this particular service, or product, or software, whatever. You're lucky if your user gives you 40 or 50% of their attention. You're lucky. So if you really want to make your software usable, you need to make sure that you're not wasting people's time and you're giving them the option that they need whenever possible early on. So, for example, I previously used eDreams to book a ticket, right? And I liked it because of the cheap prices, obviously. But when it comes to user experience, every single time, because you use a website and then you go back to it again, and we all know about cookies, we all know about the data that can be stored in your account. Even with all of that, it still doesn't know that I'm traveling from the United Kingdom. Don't tell me which airport, don't suggest Heathrow or Gatwick or whatever. but at least either detect it from my IP address, I allow you to use my IP address to detect that, or check the previous experiences and help me not spend more time on your platform, because this will increase my reservoir of goodwill. Because if I go to Skype Canada, for example, every single time I go and I see the system knows who I am already. It makes it feel personal. It saves me time. And before we conclude today, we're gonna be discussing 3 main UX principles that you should know. And when we're talking about principles, we're basically talking about, again, high-level guidelines. But principles are applied across industries. They're applied everywhere, in all kind of different industries, not just software, of course. And if you apply the principles, including the 3 principles that we're going to be talking about today, you increase the probability of your software succeeding. Anybody heard of any of these laws before? Nope. So Hicks law, Fitts law, and Jacob's law. These 3 laws are essentially the top 3 UX laws that you should know. And from next week, we're going to be discussing more of these principles, and then we're going to be expanding the design patterns. But starting from these 3 rules, starting from today, you can apply them in every single software that you build. Hicks law. What is Hicks law? Hicks law states that the time it takes to make a decision depends on the number of options presented, which means the more options you provide to your user, the longer they're going to take a decision, right? Yes. And why is that a problem? Let's take a look at this interesting street in Dublin. It's a great touristic visual to look at, and if I was in Dublin, I'll definitely go and look at this interesting pole full of signs, but I'm pretty sure the cars would have an accident before they decide where they're going, right or left, right? So the more you provide options to your users, the more mental stress you're giving them. Don't ask them for too much, right? Just give them what they want. Because if I'm going to spend too much time, and I'm pretty sure it happened at least once with you before. You went to a website and you wanted to register or something, and it asked you for so much, and I'm out. It does happen. So make sure that you don't mentally stress your users and don't give them a lot of options, or at least break them down. Break down the options, right? One of the reasons why I'm not a huge Windows fan, right? When I want to search for something on Windows, forget that I have 3 different places to search for. Look at the options up there. So I know that it's quite clear there, but even subconsciously, your mind is considering all of these options to make sure that you're choosing the best option before you do it. So if you're going to show all of these options to your user before they're committing a search, not saying that it's wrong, but check Apple and check how they allow their users to go and search between their files. Don't give the users lots of options, because again, even if they're not going to look at them and consider all of them, subconsciously they will still need to make sure that they're making the right option, and they're not choosing the wrong one. And that's why when you go on websites to look for prices, you essentially see this. 3 different boxes, usually, if not 90% of the times. Because if I'm going to provide you less than 3, you're going to feel like I'm not giving you enough options. And if I'm going to give you more than 3, you're going to feel like it's too much and you're not going to end up buying. And that's why most of the websites, you see they provide you 3 options for their prices. 1, 2, 3, and usually they highlight you the one in the middle, the one that they want you to choose. This way, they're not just limiting the options to 3, but they're helping you to choose as well, subconsciously. Fifth law. It's faster to hit larger targets that are closer to you than it is to hit smaller targets that are farther away. What does this mean? It means that me clicking this button that's big and next to my thumb, it's way easier for me than to click this button at the top left screen, right? This emergency phone in a construction site, for example, it has this big, red, chunky, but it's asking you to press it, like please press me. It's so huge that there's no way, if there's an emergency, the person who's handling this phone will pause and think, which button shall I click for emergency? Because imagine if they put it as one of these, if this is the one, for example, the emergency button, right? I'm pretty sure if there's an emergency, you'll have to pause at least for a second or so, 2 or 3 seconds before you click on it. But this button is quite clear. It's asking you to press it. And that's why you see this across multiple applications, multiple websites. There's this button that's clear, colored, big, and it's close to you as well, asking you to press it, because that's the main source of action. The companies want you, when you're checking out, to buy. They want you to focus on the most common use cases, and that's why it's always that clear on the interfaces of the big apps and websites. However, again, how many times, and I'm pretty sure like this actually still exists in the current UI of the train stations even here. How many times you want to go and you want to collect your ticket if you bought it on the app, and the numbers, first of all, they are so hard to press on, and every time you press on a button, they're not actually adding numbers, they're canceling the order action or the whole process. You will need to click on enter, then you end up pressing on 4 or something like that, and it just delays the whole process and you might miss your train as a result of that. Imagine if alternatively with this design, right? Here are the numbers, here's the search, we have 2 options, clear and delete, but we have one big chunky button at the end, which is print tickets. There's no way you're gonna miss that button, and there's no way you're gonna actually press on another button. Well, maybe you might press on the 0 if the screen was horrible, but it's a way to interface for you to interact with. And finally, Jacob's law. Jacob's law states that users prefer your UI to be designed the same way or similarly to other UIs that they use, right? Do you remember, those who attended the first session will remember this, the BlackBerry 10, the very first smartphone from BlackBerry that they thought will revolutionize the industry, but it was a flop. The reason that BlackBerry exited the market and is no longer existing. Because instead of having a home button back in 2014, they introduced different kind of gestures and swipes, and they thought that's innovation. They thought that's creativity, right? But it was not right. It was not like, at the moment, our iPhones, they don't have a home screen. But that was in 2014. If you're gonna actually build a software or a product that is new to people, if you wanna really reinvent the wheel, make sure that you do it right. Because if you don't do it right, you're actually gonna end up with a product that nobody knows how to use or wants to use, and it's going to make them and their life way harder. And to explain this law and to finalize, I'm going to give the mic to Nielsen, the man himself, to explain what this law is. Jacob, actually.
Brings your content, your message, which is what you want. On the other hand, if you violate Jacob's law of instant user experience, and you I was in London, down by the Houses of Parliament, because I want to talk about Jacob's law of the instant user experience. Now, Jacob's law of the instant user experience is not a law like what they're debating in Parliament here behind me. It's not something voted on by politicians. It's not even something that I decided on. Jacob's law is just describes how things are. It's more like a law of nature. So Jacob's law of the instant user experience says that users spend most of their time on other websites than your website. So when people get their cumulative experience of all these other websites, websites. That adds up to their understanding of how a website should work, or what are the design conventions on the internet. So if your website does the same as most other websites, then when somebody arrives at your site, they're going to know how to use it. They're going to focus, therefore, on your products, your services, your offerings, your content, your message, which is what you want. On the other hand, if you violate Jacob's law of the internet user experience and you do things differently, just to come, oh, let's try some new fancy thing. No, because then people are not going to know how to use it. They're going to be confused. And if people are confused on the web, what most often happens is they just leave. You know, the back button beckons. The back button is very attractive on the web. And so they're just going to be out of there, you lost that customer. So I really, really strongly encourage you to pay attention to Jacob's law of the internet user experience, follow design conventions, do the same thing as most other websites do. Because remember, users spend most of their time on other websites than your website.
And not because he invented the law is telling you to use it, but because it's really essential. And think of it when it comes to almost every website that you use. Amazon, when you want to check out, they're not changing the way checkout is because they just want to take your money. They just want you to finish this step as fast as possible. And what's the best way to do that? Is to show you an interface that you're familiar with. Your creativity could ruin the sweet experience of users, it can make them quit. And that really doesn't mean that you shouldn't be creative when you're designing, but you should have the heuristics involved. You should make sure that the principles are right and that you've done enough research before you say you want to design something. So don't reinvent the wheel, but rather give people experiences that are enjoyable, generate positive emotions, and a huge emphasis on the laws and principles that we discussed. Next time, we're going to be talking about design patterns, and it's going to be a quite interactive workshop next time, so make sure you come. You're going to be not just drawing this time, we're going to be going through the UX process for an airline website. So you're going to be part of designing that UX process. It's quite essential to grasp this knowledge first, because once you go and you practice these exercises, you know what you're doing. So thank you for coming today. Really hope you enjoyed the session, you knew about UX design. I highly recommend that you do further reading, and if you have any questions, we will be around. And now we have some pizzas.